Hey, what's up YouTube? I wanted to make a video pretty much talking about the civil rights and how people in the civil rights were manipulated. I'm not gonna speak on how they were manipulated in this video, but I just want to talk about how it was used to deceive African Americans and minorities here in the country, and how it wasn't for the betterment of minorities. I'll give a little history lesson. Back in the 1950s and before, over 90% of African Americans owned their own homes, businesses, schools, stores, their own land, and so much more. You can Google Black Wall Street. The most popular one was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was burned down by envious and jealous white Americans, and the black Americans who lived there, they weren't being helped by the U.S. government. The U.S. government actually performed the first air bombing in the world on Tulsa. That was the first bombing ever from the sky, from an airplane. They did that to the Black Wall Street over in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But there were Black Wall Streets all over the U.S., especially because of segregation. Blacks were forced to live in their own communities. I mean, there were blacks living outside their communities, but it wasn't how it is today. Pretty much blacks can move anywhere if they can afford it. There's still, I believe that segregation is still alive. They just made it more economy based than it is, color based. But like I was saying, majority of blacks, we had our own towns. We actually had small towns. A lot of those towns are gone now because after desegregation, a lot of blacks moved into they felt more comfortable moving to inner cities, and a lot of them moved up north after segregation. A lot of them moved into bigger cities where a lot of whites were. And a lot of people don't know that before the 1950s, a lot of whites lived in the inner city, and a lot of the blacks who lived in the South lived outside of the city. That's why you still see, mainly in the South, you see a lot of blacks who live in the outskirts, because sometimes their family owned land out there and they still live on that same land. But like I was saying, 90% before the 1950s, over 90% of blacks owned their own things. They owned their own property, businesses, etc. But after the 1960s and on to this present day, less than 13% of African Americans own their own property here in the U.S. So tell me, did desegregation help the blacks? Did it help African Americans? Did it help minorities in general? I don't think so. Because there's a lot of things that was introduced to us, minorities, specifically African Americans, after desegregation. And a lot of the civil rights leaders were being puppeted by the feds. Martin Luther King and a lot of other people who were running in the civil rights at the time, who were leading in the civil rights. But one of the main public figures at the time that wasn't being puppeted by the government, the white supremacist government, was Malcolm X. And this is why he preached against integration, because he knew that integration would destroy the African American nation within the United States. So he knew that, and that's why they had him killed. Now, Martin Luther King, on the other hand, he was killed because what he was about to say, the stuff that he was going to come out and really speak on how the civil rights wasn't for the betterment. And that's why in his last speech, it was very deep and it was very emotional, because he knew that he was about to get taken out because of where he was starting to go down, the path that he was starting to go down. And especially the government, they like offing people. Once when they're done with you, they like offing you. They do that to a lot of people, no matter if you're white or black. Especially if you go in a direction that they don't like. But like I said before, the civil rights, it was not created to help blacks. it was created to pretty much rob the resources of African Americans and to make us weaker as a community. Because, like I said, after desegregation, there were so many things that we got hit with. We got hit with welfare, which kicked in very hard in the 70s. I think I said this before, I can't remember. But we got hit with welfare. Sorry about the noise outside. We got hit with welfare. Our women got hit with feminism. We also got hit with the Vietnam War. Now, the two things that's very important, well, was really important about the 70s that started the fatherless black America, was the Vietnam War and welfare. Because in order to get the welfare, and you'll have to understand this, the modern day welfare was crafted for African American women. It was made a certain way to keep the father out of the household, because in the 70s, when you applied for welfare, you weren't supposed to have a male living with you. Even if you were struggling hard and you had a husband or even a boyfriend living with you, you could not apply for welfare. They did that intentionally because they wanted a fatherless home in the black communities, because at that time, majority of people in welfare were African Americans. It's vice versa today. And the wind just shut my door. But it's vice versa today. And also the Vietnam War took a lot of black males out of the household. That was a war that had the greatest amount of African American soldiers. Was the Vietnam War, and a lot of our men did not return. A lot of them had to return on tours over and over again, while white soldiers, more and more white soldiers, got to go home. And if you read your history and you read a lot of books, you will see this to be truth. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say, is that don't be deceived by desegregation and civil rights, because you have to ask yourself, why do they teach us this so often? Why do they regurgitate the same information so often? It's because they want us to believe it, and they want us to believe that it's a good thing to happen to us. But it's not, because when you look at the stats and you look at the facts, you will see that after desegregation, our people went down a very slippery slope. We are lower than we have been since slavery. I won't compare it to slavery, but we are very low as a people right now. You know, a lot of us don't value family and community simply because of what has happened over the past couple of decades. But before that, we had our own communities and towns, which allowed us to work together. And as soon as we got desegregation, the white man knew that we would coon in a heartbeat and run over to the white person's store and support their business instead of supporting our own businesses. And that's how our businesses collapsed. Some of the last businesses that I've seen owned by blacks, I actually seen one about 5 years ago in my city. It was this African store, but it closed down because they weren't getting any support. It wasn't an African store, it was a store with African literature and stuff like that. And I remember growing up that there was a few African American owned stores in my neighborhood, but they closed up because they weren't getting supported, by the community. The people in the community rather go to the Arab stores, and they were being bought out by the Arab stores too. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I know I said it before, but desegregation was not a good thing, and people have to understand that. If you go back and you read, older books, history books, and you look at old newspaper articles, you will see that blacks had so much more than what we do today. I mean, most of us don't even own anything. We don't own property. We don't own nothing because we're no longer supporting each other. We'd rather spend our money at, big chains, big clothing chains and stuff like that, and buy our beds and furnitures from, businesses who are owned by Europeans or Caucasians rather than our own people. So I'm done, and you people, you have a good day.